Things are going to change for Camilla.
Time capsule sealed and buried by Princess Diana has been opened.
And when William, Prince of Wales, succeeds his father as king, Camilla's title will change again.
What would you do if you walked into a room and found someone destroying the last pieces of your mother's memory? It sounds unthinkable, doesn't it? Yet inside the quiet walls of Clarence House, on an evening that should have been ordinary, Prince William stumbled upon a scene that would shake the royal family to its core. Smoke curling into the air, flames licking at silk and paper, and standing there, alone in a room that had been locked for years, was Camilla feeding Diana's most personal belongings into a fire. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't spring cleaning. This was something far more calculated, far more painful. Stay with us as we uncover what really happened that night and why the royal household may never be the same again. The night everything changed. It was supposed to be a quiet Thursday evening, the kind where staff move softly through hallways, lights dim early, and royalty retreats into private quarters without much fuss. But inside Clarence House, something was very wrong. A young assistant named Oliver had been carrying a tray of tea toward Camilla's rooms when he noticed at first a strange smell drifting through the corridor. Not the comforting scent of wood burning in a fireplace, but something sharper, something laced with fabric and old perfume. He paused, unsure whether to investigate or simply ignore it. Curiosity won. Following the scent, he found himself in a part of the house rarely visited. A narrow passageway that most staff assumed led to storage, and there, at the end of the hall, was a door that had been sealed for years. Only now it was slightly open. Light flickered from inside like candlelight, and the smell grew stronger. Oliver knew better than to enter without permission, but before he could decide what to do, Prince William arrived. He had stopped by Clarence House unexpectedly after a charity event, planning only a brief visit before heading home. But when Oliver approached him, pale and stammering about smoke and an open door, William's expression shifted. Without a word, he walked briskly toward the hallway. That room had once held his mother's belongings. It had been locked out of respect, sealed by agreement after her passing.
The princess who spent her life in the relentless glare of the public eye died in a speeding car in Paris.
Only a handful of people had keys. As William pushed the door open, the warmth hit him first. Then, the sight. Camilla stood in the center of the room, dressed casually, her hair pinned back. In her hand were a pair of tongs, and in front of her, a vintage metal bin filled with flames. Inside that fire were pieces of Diana's life. A silk scarf curling into ash, photographs blackening at the edges, the corner of a leather journal, its pages glowing red before crumbling away. William froze. For a moment he didn't speak. He simply stared, trying to process what he was seeing. Camilla turned and saw him. She didn't look surprised. She didn't apologize. She looked caught. The silence between them was suffocating. William's eyes moved across the room. On the floor lay a torn photograph of Diana laughing with Harry at Balmoral. Near the bin was a sapphire earring, scorched but still recognizable. These weren't random items. They had been chosen, carefully, intentionally. William turned back toward the hallway, his voice low but firm. "Get the staff," he said. Now, the real story was just beginning. What was lost in the flames? When the fire was finally put out, what remained was heartbreaking. Staff members moved carefully, wearing gloves as they sifted through the ashes. Every item they pulled out told a story. A corner of a diary page, the ink smudged but still legible in places. "I felt peace today," it read in Diana's handwriting. One staff member holding it had to step away, unable to hold back tears. That journal had been one of Diana's most private possessions. She used to write in it late at night when the palace felt too heavy. Seeing it burned felt like losing her voice all over again. There was also a single ballet slipper, blackened at the toe, its ribbon melted into a twisted knot. Diana had worn those slippers during a private performance she once did for Charles, a moment of vulnerability and grace that few had witnessed. William had watched footage of that performance countless times as a child. Now, holding the ruined slipper in his hands, it felt like another piece of her had been stolen. But the most devastating discovery was a letter, addressed to Harry. The envelope was charred but intact. Inside, the paper was half burned. The top portion survived. "My darling boy," it read, "no matter where life takes you, never forget that kindness is stronger than status." And then it stopped. The rest was gone, as if her voice had been cut off mid-sentence. William clenched his jaw. He didn't cry. He didn't shout. But inside, something broke. These weren't just objects. They were fragments of his mother's heart, her thoughts, her love, and someone had tried to erase them. Staff members who had served Diana stood quietly, some with tears streaming down their faces. Elizabeth, a senior dresser who had once helped Diana prepare for galas, whispered to another aide, "That perfume on the blouse? I'd recognize it anywhere. She wore it every summer." The weight of what had been destroyed settled over everyone in the room like a fog. This wasn't carelessness. This was deliberate. And the question on everyone's mind was simple but haunting. Why? A confrontation behind closed doors. By morning, the fire was out, but the damage had only begun. William stayed at Clarence House through the night. He didn't sleep. He sat in a private study, staring at the small box of salvaged items, his mind racing. When Camilla finally entered the room the next morning, she closed the door behind her. Her face was calm, controlled. She seemed ready to explain. William didn't turn around at first. He kept his back to her, looking out the window. "I suppose you want an explanation," Camilla said, her tone steady. William set the box down and finally faced her. There was no anger in his eyes, just disappointment, deep, quiet disappointment. "I don't need an explanation," he said. "I need an answer." Camilla folded her arms. "I didn't think it was worth keeping those things. They've been sitting there for decades. No one looks at them. No one uses them." William stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because they were hers. Because they're all we have left." Camilla sighed, frustration creeping into her voice. "You think I don't understand what she meant to you? To the country? I've lived in her shadow for years, William. Every room I walk into, she's still there. In the papers, in people's memories, even in your father's silence." William didn't flinch. "That shadow you're talking about isn't a ghost. It's her legacy. And last night you tried to burn it." Camilla opened her mouth to respond, but William raised a hand. "This isn't about the past. This is about respect. You touched something sacred without permission. That room was sealed for a reason." There was a long pause. Camilla looked at him, perhaps expecting him to soften, to meet her halfway, but he didn't. Not this time. He picked up one of the half-burned photographs from the desk. "I watched her cry in this dress," he said quietly. "I watched her comfort people you and I will never meet. That's not just fabric. That's my mother's story, her presence, her life." Camilla looked away. She said nothing. "I don't care what the world says," William continued. "Behind these doors, I will protect what's mine. What was hers? If you ever try to take that from me again, there won't be another conversation like this." He walked past her and opened the door. He didn't wait for a response. As he left, staff members in the hallway stepped aside in silence. They didn't need to ask what had happened. His face said everything. The palace reacts in whispers. Word spread quickly, but not through headlines or press releases. It moved through glances, through hushed voices in the servants' hall, through cups of tea left untouched. The staff at Clarence House were trained to handle royal drama with grace. But this was different. This wasn't scandal. This was grief. In the staff quarters, Elizabeth sat at a long table, hands folded, staring at nothing. She hadn't spoken much since the fire. When a younger aide finally asked if it was really Diana's belongings, Elizabeth nodded slowly. "It was hers," she said. "I'd know that perfume anywhere." Her voice cracked, and she pressed a napkin to her eyes. Thomas, a footman who had served both Diana and Camilla, paced nervously in another room. He remembered bringing Diana tea while she sat on the floor writing notes to her sons. He remembered her warmth. Now, watching those memories go up in smoke felt like watching history being erased. "It wasn't just burning clothes," he whispered. "It was like tearing pages out of a book. Like they wanted her forgotten." The older staff, those who had known Diana personally, were hit the hardest. They didn't just remember her as a princess. They remembered her as a person. She had asked about their families. She had helped carry boxes when someone was hurt. She had been kind in ways that mattered. Behind closed doors, there was quiet debate. Some wondered if Camilla had been given permission. Others whispered that maybe she had acted out of pain, not cruelty. But none of it explained the secrecy. The locked door, the chosen items, the fire. Later that evening, the house steward gathered everyone privately. "You all know what this means," he said. "We saw too much tonight. Say nothing to the press. Say nothing outside these walls." Elizabeth spoke quietly from the back. "We were there for her when she lived. We'll protect her in death." No one disagreed. That night, no one in the household slept well. They had always worked behind the scenes. But now, they were witnesses. And some things, once seen, cannot be unseen. A father's silence. When King Charles returned to London the following day, William was waiting. Their meeting took place in the green drawing room. It lasted less than 20 minutes, but it would change everything between them. William laid it all out. The fire, the burned letters, the destroyed keepsakes. Charles listened in silence, fingers pressed together under his chin. When William finished, there was a long pause. "She burned Mum's things," William said, his voice tired now. "Not one or two, dozens, and she picked them out carefully. That wasn't cleaning, that was trying to erase her." Charles finally looked up. "Camilla didn't do this to hurt you," he said quietly. "You have to understand. She's carried a weight all these years." William blinked, stunned. "You think this was about her pain?" "Dad, I found her burning Mum's personal letters. A letter to Harry, photos, a ballet slipper." Charles rubbed the bridge of his nose. "It was wrong," he said. "I won't defend that. But I won't let this become a public war either." "That's not up to you anymore," William replied. "You weren't there." "I was." Charles stood slowly, signaling the conversation was ending. "I'll speak to her," he said. "Privately." William nodded, but inside, something cracked. His father had not once asked what was lost. He had not once asked how William felt. That hurt more than the fire itself. As William left the room, he whispered one final thing. "I'm not doing this again, Dad. Not like this." Charles stood by the window long after his son was gone, staring at his own reflection in the glass. The room that will never open again. 2 days later, as dawn settled softly over London, William returned to Kensington Palace. The corridors were silent, that kind of stillness that only exists before the palace wakes. He moved quietly, his footsteps echoing faintly against the marble floors as he made his way toward a familiar door. In his hand was a single key, small and worn, its metal warmed by his grip. He paused before the door, his mother's private room, a space untouched since her passing. Not locked away in grief, but preserved in quiet reverence. When he turned the key, the soft click seemed to echo through time itself. The door opened, and the air that greeted him was thick with memory. The faint scent of lavender lingered, mixed with the must of old paper and faint traces of her perfume. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through sheer curtains, illuminating the room that had once been her refuge, her sanctuary from the weight of royal life. On the writing desk lay an empty vase, an old fountain pen, and a few faded letters she'd once written in her elegant looping script. William stood still for several moments, his gaze fixed on the chair she used to sit in. Every corner of the room whispered of her presence, her laughter, her thoughts, her quiet resilience. Slowly, he crossed to the desk and knelt beside it. From the bottom drawer, he began selecting pieces of her life pieces that no museum or archive could ever truly protect. A small stack of handwritten letters, a cassette tape labeled "For My Boys," a delicate bracelet etched with his name. He gathered them carefully, placing each item into a black container lined with velvet. When he finished, he closed the lid and turned to his aide, his voice low but steady. "Store it in the royal vault," he said, "not under her name, under mine." The aide hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded solemnly, understanding the depth of that choice. Before leaving, William called for the head steward. His tone left no room for debate. "From this moment on, no one enters this room without my approval. No cameras, no visitors, not even family. This room is sacred." That afternoon, the order became official. Security was reinforced. Access revoked. There was no press statement, no public explanation, only silence. But those who had known Diana, those who had once walked those corridors beside her, felt an unspoken peace. William had done what no one else had dared. He had reclaimed her story not as an heir, but as her son. A son's silent promise. That evening, William sat alone in his study, the dim light from the fire flickering across his face. The air was heavy with the scent of burnt paper, a cruel reminder of what had been lost in the recent blaze at the palace archives. He stared at the flames as if searching for answers within them, his mind replaying the images of his mother's letters, her photos, her memories now reduced to ash. On the table before him lay a single stack of salvaged items, half-burnt photographs, a faded locket, and one untouched picture of Diana holding baby George. Her smile in that photo carried the same warmth that had once filled every room she entered. William traced the edge of the photo with his fingers, his expression unreadable. For a moment, the future king was not a monarch in waiting, but a son who had lost the one person who made him believe in love that asked for nothing in return. He reached for a worn leather notebook, the one he kept hidden behind official documents, and began to write. His handwriting was steady, deliberate, but his words trembled with emotion. He didn't write for the press or the history books. He wrote for her. He wrote to tell her that her light still guided him, that he would raise George, Charlotte, and Louis not as heirs to a crown, but as heirs to her heart. That he would make compassion, not power, the foundation of their future. "You were never just history," he ended quietly. "You are still my home." He folded the letter carefully, sealing it in a small silver box. He locked it with the key he now wore around his neck, a promise, a secret, a piece of her he refused to lose again. The box would rest beside the preserved artifacts of his mother's life, waiting for the day when his children were old enough to understand what legacy truly meant. But that night did not end in silence. William's grief became a mission. He began drafting plans for a new initiative in Diana's name, one that would carry her compassion into the next generation. A foundation focused on mental health, children's welfare, and human dignity, the causes that defined her. There would be no headlines yet, no announcement to the world. This was personal. This was sacred. As dawn broke over London, he stood by the window, the light washing away the shadows of the night. The city stirred awake, but inside, William felt something far deeper: peace. The fire had destroyed what could be seen, but not what could be felt. His mother's legacy lived on, not in monuments or titles, but in memory, in purpose, and in the quiet strength of her son, who vowed that her light would never fade again. In the end, it wasn't the fire that left the deepest scar. It was what it tried to silence. But memory is stubborn. Legacy lives beyond flames. What Camilla thought could be erased was, in truth, reignited. William's quiet defiance, his sealing of Diana's room, and his silent tribute marked more than a response to betrayal. It was a son's vow, a guardian's stand, and a future king's declaration that some histories are too sacred to burn. Behind palace walls, loyalty whispered louder than power, and in the stillness that followed, it became clear Diana's presence would never fade, not in photos, not in her children, not in the hearts of those who knew her light. What do you think about this story? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more untold royal truths and emotional deep dives. Until next time, stay curious and never stop seeking the full story.